Let's begin with the pointy hat, shall we? Does she mention the pointy hat? Let me see. Hat. Oh yeah, no, the threat. There we go. Hats. There we go. So, female brewers also wore tall pointed hats. False. No, zero. I've looked into it. I looked at it. I looked at manuals from the 1430s, 1475, 1512, 1577. I looked at all the different images. Zero, nothing. The only pointy hats that you can find that are associated with a negative, usually negative interpretation of the masses in some countries in medieval Europe are those used by Jews. Full stop. There is not a single image. In fact, I'll tell you what medieval imagery and illuminations, how they represent witches. There isn't a single one. I think the first one is from the late 18th century and early 19th century. Then that's when we get the pointy hat. This is complete, utter fabrication. The way witches are described and drawn in medieval art is either completely naked, half naked, or wearing common peasant clothing, and that's it. Full stop. There is no such a thing as a special hat, nor was there a special hat worn by female brewers. Nowhere. And again, I looked into it. Neither with the witches in the medieval period, nor with female brewers specifically. Let's continue, so that they can get easily spotted in the markets. Complete nonsense. Much like the spooky fictional witches of today. Had nothing to do with it. Many also had cats. Even this thing with the cats, if anything, cats were seen positively in the medieval period. I know you're thinking of Pope Gregory. I'll make a different video on that. That's also a myth, but regardless. Cats were seen as positive in the medieval period because a lot of farms needed cats to protect from rats. And not only farms did that, but also breweries. So, were there cats? Cats were a common pet in the Middle Ages, but it was not associated with black magic. If anything, you know what animals were associated with black magic by the Catholic Church, the Curia, and in general Christendom? Goats, dogs, bulls as well, but mostly goats. The goat is the demonic animal. And even though it is, farmers still had goats for the cheese and the milk. It's not like twist their head. No, they still had them. But if you look, yeah, poor goats, exactly. So, yeah, the goat, the ram, the goat, the dog. And I'm not making it up. Like, I'm looking at the actual iconography or like the way they are described by actual medieval writers. Never a mention of a cat. For example, at the time of the witch trials, so post-medieval, beers were often brewed in large cauldron-like pots, that's correct, that bubbled with the heat as they stirred. Sound familiar? You idiot. This would not be visible by the people in the streets. This is something that you would do in your house separately during the brewing process. But you wouldn't take the freaking cauldron, to the street markets. No, because we know how the ale was transported after being brewed, which was a long process, by the way, to where it was sold when you had extra, and it's either in wooden barrels or in pottery, like vases or amphorae, like they did in the Roman period, by the way. So no, there will be no cauldron to be seen with a woman doing this and people on the side, the medieval people on the side going, oh, you see, that's a witch, she's brewing a poison. Nothing. And if you look, and I swear, I probably spent too long looking at actual court documents from the medieval period and post-medieval when it comes to witches. They never mention the only thing they mention is either poison, but that's poison. Like, oh yeah, this witch poisoned this individual, burn her to the stake. That's one thing they say as an accusation. Or another one, the only time that I found a mention that had to do with a brewery was saying not that the witch was the brewer, but that a witch had tried to poison the ale in the brewery to kill the population. Nothing. Finally, they used broomstick. Oh yeah, my gosh, I called it. Broomstick placed outside their doors to signify that they were open for business and had beer available to sell. Now, this is a maybe. I looked into it. It is possible that maybe in some areas, not everywhere in Europe, but it is possible that in some areas maybe they did this, but it's not documented, so it's speculative. It's possible, you could hang up a broom, but then again, a broom is associated with witchcraft. It is one of the few things that they get right. But it's not because a broom is associated with brewing. That has nothing to do with it. It's because a broom is something that most people had at home, and it was indeed, in the medieval period, associated with women. So, considering the fact that a lot of witches were women, not all of them as we discussed, but a lot of them were, is it really so strange to imagine that they would fly using an object that is normally associated in women in the medieval mind? But it's not the only one. In fact, the idea that witches fly with a broom becomes primary once again in the Victorian period and in modern imagination. But if you look at the way witches are represented in medieval iconography, sometimes they fly because they fly. They don't need an object, they just levitate. That's one way they're represented. Other times, you know what they ride? A freaking goat, connecting again to the satanic symbolism of the goat, meaning the devil and diabolical witchcraft and all and what that. That is very common. And sometimes the broom, other times is a regular stick, doesn't even need to be a broom. And so there is that. They are really stretching here, trying to connect it, because again, everyone had a freaking broom. Their creativity and years of effort are forgotten. Well, not with me, because I do medieval history, so this is going to become a video eventually, so I guess I'm helping the history of women in this case. Like so many historical female accomplishments erased to form a more convenient narrative. Isn't that ironic that someone whose article is 95% myths, isn't it ironical that they say, the other people, it's like this is a projection. This is a projection. So next time you see a witch on a late night joyride or crack open a cold one with the boys, remember the pointy-headed beer brewing cat taming women that never existed of the war on witches. Without them, we'd have a very different Halloween and far fewer craft beer connoisseurs. Now, wouldn't it be better to ditch the nonsense, do proper research, and then tell the history of the women in the medieval period that were brewing in their houses for the family and for the local community? Isn't that better than pushing this absolute, complete, total, utter nonsense? I mean, I don't know. Is it just me? The cat protecting grain, if you really want to take the cat and say, what type of person in the medieval mind is the cat associated with? It wouldn't be brewers, it would be millers. And this is once again based on tales. Tales. Like you read fairy tales. If you hear people mentioning cats in connection to what? Millers. Brewers too, but millers first. So if the cat was magical in the witchcrafty sense, then it would condemn millers before it condemned brewers. So that's another one. Here's the thing that I wanted to say about this. Let me see. Yes, so the real difference between the 13th century, 12th century, 14th century, and then finally the jump into the 15th century, as I was saying, is mass production. And one thing that I did write here in my notes that I wanted to share with you is the fact that basically the difference is that we went, when it comes to brewing, from small scale to large scale production, which involved the local authorities. And that's the reason why this happened. So craft organizations, which basically are medieval guilds, got involved also because the real reason why that happened has nothing to do with sexism, it's taxes. Have you ever seen the way medieval lieges and noblemen, proprietors, people that owned land, they tax everything? You pick up snails, there is a tax for it. You fish in the pond and it belongs to your lord, there is a tax for it. For the fish that you sell it, there is a tax. You go into the grove, into the woods and you get some, not poaching, but I'm saying legally, you get a couple of deers, there is a tax for it. There is a tax for literally, even frogs, they had a tax for frogs. If you pick up the frogs, you cook them and you sell it, there is a tax for it. Therefore, once they saw that the brewing had a potential for a market, they taxed it. And once there is taxation, there is standardization, and once there is standardizations, there are licenses involved, and so it enters the legal system. And obviously, once it enters the legal system, because of the way the medieval society was organized, a wife, once again, could own a business together with her husband, but an unmarried woman technically she could, but it was harder. And that's